Most creative nonfiction feels like a raw dump of memory, a stream of consciousness on the page. But to make those personal details mean something, they require structural engineering. In this genre, we call these structures forms. Form is the spatial and chronological arrangement of information. It isn't a formula, but a design choice that dictates exactly how an audience processes the underlying truth of a story. These designs fall into two categories. The first is the linear narrative form, which functions like a single vector line moving toward a destination. Running parallel are fragmented narrative forms, isolated blocks of text that snap together to create a larger interlocking image. Linear forms rely on a continuous thematic trajectory to guide the reader. Fragmented forms rely on juxtaposition, the jarring collision of separate ideas that forces the reader to find the connection. The architecture you select determines whether the reader follows a guided path or assembles a complex puzzle. Linear narrative forms are defined by consistency. While they don't have to follow a strict timeline, they must maintain a direct, unwavering focus on a single idea or event from start to finish. The personal essay is the foundational linear form. It uses a detail from the author's life as a structural entry point to access a much larger, often societal issue. We see this scaling effect in Hanif Abdurraqib's work. He uses the specific tragedy of the Tamir Rice killing, captured here on this protest sign, as an anchor to trace a line from a personal friendship out toward the systemic reality of race in America. Roxane Gay uses a similar trajectory. A physical visit to this densely populated neighborhood in Haiti serves as the catalyst for a broader inquiry into geography and heritage. Gay leverages this ancestral visit to deconstruct the nuances of privilege. Her personal journey provides the framework for a universal discussion on how we acknowledge or ignore our own advantages. This linear trajectory works for any subject. It can bridge the gap between an intimate authorial detail and social niceties, mundane objects, or even simple pet peeves. Mechanically, the personal essay functions as a bridge. It structurally forces the reader to connect a private experience to a universal theme. As a photograph fades, its details shift. This represents the unique constraint of the memoir. It's a structure built entirely on the fallibility of memory. Memoir relies on circularity. The architecture begins in the present, loops back into the past to recount an event, and then returns to the present to evaluate how that event changed the narrator. This loop highlights changes in perception. It creates a structural dialogue between the voice of the younger self and the wiser narrator looking back. Beth Ann Fennelly uses this to explore her childhood during the blizzard of 1979. By anchoring her essay in this specific winter event, she contrasts her youthful view of her father with her adult perspective as a mother. The epistolary, or direct address form, takes a different linear approach. This essay is architected as a letter to a specific recipient. There is a strict rule here. The recipient must have a direct, real-world connection to the subject. This isn't a fictitious diary entry. It is a communication intended for a specific person. This creates a dual audience mechanic. As the diagram shows, a single line of address splits into two. There is the overt recipient being addressed and the implied audience, the actual readers observing the exchange. Ta-Nehisi Coates uses this split perfectly. By addressing his son directly, he creates a structure that allows him to speak to every Black parent navigating the same systemic challenges. We also see linear momentum in the meditative essay, where researched facts and scientific data replace personal history to drive the narrative trajectory. Whether the writer is manipulating time in a memoir or audience in an epistolary essay, linear forms succeed by creating an unbroken line of logic that guides the reader to a final revelation. When a narrative shatters, the focus shifts. Fragmented forms move away from continuous trajectory and toward a system of disjointed assembly. These forms ignore chronological transitions. Instead, they rely on juxtaposition, the intentional, often jarring contrast between adjacent images. In the segmented essay, each fragment operates as a self-contained micro-essay. These are physically separated by white space or asterisks, forcing the reader to pause between ideas. This modular architecture mimics how the mind actually processes memory and trauma. We don't experience our lives as neat timelines. We experience them as free associative clusters. Zadie Smith employs this in The Lazy River. By stacking disconnected details of a vacation in Spain, she allows the fragments to accumulate until they form a larger commentary on cultural passivity. The braided essay is a specialized fragmentation. It weaves two or more seemingly unrelated storylines together in alternating segments. Braided threads rely on internal resonance. Each pass adds a layer of context to the storylines until a central metaphor ties the disparate threads together. In fragmented forms, the meaning isn't handed to the reader. It is forged in the negative space between the fragments, turning the audience into an active participant. The list essay is a highly engineered fragmented form. While it appears simple, it requires careful craft to maintain thematic focus while creating startling contrasts. This pedigree dates back 1,000 years to Sei Shonagon. She governed the boundaries of her lists with specific, catchy titles, like Hateful Things, creating a rigid structure for her observations. The impact of a list essay occurs at the sentence level. The meaning of an individual line is redefined by the entries flanking it. A single item can change from humorous to tragic based entirely on its placement. Jill Kulongowski rearranged her students' fears on index cards until a macro pattern emerged. By physically curating the proximity of these fragments, she allowed a broader insight into human vulnerability to reveal itself. Because the content is disconnected, the title becomes the primary architectural constraint. It acts as the thematic gravity that holds the fragments in orbit. A successful list essay proves that curation is creation. By controlling the order of raw data, the writer controls the emotional reaction of the reader. These two paradigms represent the choice every writer makes. Linear forms guide readers through a continuous evolution of memory, while fragmented forms force them to synthesize colliding parts. Ultimately, labels are fluid. Writers avoid formulas, and these structures frequently overlap. A list essay can act as a memoir, and a segmented essay can be deeply personal. These forms are tools for understanding mechanics, not restrictions on the art itself. Look at your own material, your memories, research, and anecdotes. Ask whether that data demands the straight line of a direct address or the complex weave of a braided narrative. Your chosen architecture transforms raw memory into a deliberate narrative. It is the framework that gives the truth its final, readable shape.